Hi, everybody. Uh, we'll just wait for a couple of seconds and, well, maybe a few more pop in. I keep forgetting that it's recorded, so if anybody wants to watch it, they can watch it whenever they want. However, we have a few questions here. Uh, One of them is from Pat Donahue. These are interesting questions, but with strange answers. So you just try and see. I'll see if I can come up with an answer that makes some basic sense. Pat's question is: I'm wondering if there is a relationship between the level of intensity of our emotional bodies, individually and collectively, and the physical world, as in wildfires, drought, climate conditions, even geological events. Do we impact on those things? Do they impact on us on an energy level? Pat, to be honest, I really don't know. There are a whole lot of people who would honestly think that that would be exactly true. And living things have intensity within them. I suspect even trees. Uh, However, the one thing that I can make a comment on is the fact that the level of intensity of emotional bodies has an effect on other human beings. And I think that this is really a segue into something that is really valuable to try and understand. Um, it's If it makes any sense, this is not a psychological orientation, but this concept has been alluded to uh, from some, not quite discussed it in this way, but for example, if you have a number of people who agree on something versus another group of people who don't agree with that something, that way of thinking, you have intensity build up in both camps, let's say. The dilemma with this is it blinds the group of people to other ideas that might broaden out the way they're seeing the world. Now, this we understand because we're involved with it on a daily basis. And almost any ism that might be out there, um, or any groupthink that seems to be of any consequence in the way we live life, we have these ways of thinking that are not necessarily always in agreement. The intensity builds because we're trained literally in our world from the time we're born to stick up for what we believe happens to be true. And it makes some sense to do that. We're not really trained to think about it, not really trained to consider something beyond what we already have decided is of value. And this is pretty rampant all through 8 billion people. It's just a normal way. This is just what we do. But in the question that you asked, there's a very interesting thing that can happen in a process that relates to human beings. If there is shifts and change in the softening of reflex responses, which are basically, some of them are quite young. Like, if you don't get your way when you're 3, you cry and yell and scream. Well, as we get older, we clean that up a bit. We don't necessarily cry, but people have cried to get their way. We don't yet necessarily scream, but people have screamed to try and get their way. All that does is increase the intensity in others to align with what we think should happen. There's no freedom in that, or there's no softness in that. There's no consideration in it. It's just, this has to be more right than anybody else's way of seeing things. It's what we've done. It's caused wars all over the place, and for a long period of time, still is causing wars. And problems between people, unfortunately, that can't allow themselves to see anything other than the way they come up with. And this is how it is with us as a human being. If you're not a human being out there, it's slightly different. You may have your own way of doing that. I don't know, but I'm talking about human beings here. Now, what happens in a group of people who try to soften down or engage with themselves differently, that, and you mentioned individuals as well, the individual affects everyone who is similar to him or her in a grouping who have similar emotional, dispositional, reflex responses. Let that settle. People with similar responses respond in a similar manner, look for validation in a similar way. There's no negation in it, it's just that's what they do. So in 8 billion people, most of us have responses. 99.9999. I don't know how many more that could be. But we have them relative to the needs we have to counter our vulnerability. With an S. And this countering is of great value in our life because it sets within us a way of looking at the world and allowing ourselves to be effectively valued in that world. There's another little string here attached to something. It makes a little bit of sense, but if we don't think like this, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Because if you allow yourself to reconsider how you are as a human being, instead of elevate and pad how you are with a certain pattern of defense, let's say, call it, or pad our value, for example, then all of a sudden we are doing exactly like other people like us would do. They have similar patterns. There's a rush that's involved with that. A rush of somehow being right. And this causes great difficulty. Why? Because it increases the intensity of our need to become emotionally defensive. And we don't defend only what we do, but we're defending ourselves. It changes from what we do to ourselves, because then if we don't defend that, then somehow we're wrong about something, or we're not worthy of something. This is not real. We're still worthy. We're still engaging. We're still are valued. But we have conditions related to value in our engagement as human beings. And these conditions are virtually involved with ideas that are linked into how we think and how we should think or shouldn't think, or all this business of valuing and devaluing. This is not a negative thing. This is just a young thing. So, get back at this business. If there is a possibility of shifting and softening and being more respectful, not only to yourself, but to others and their ideas. And of course, if everybody acted like this, 8 billion people acted like this, it would be different than groups of people who don't even know each other engaging that way and seeking to have others engage the same way to increase the volume or the engagement of the thickness of being valued or right, whatever it happens to be. This is hard for us. So if we shift and change some of that, let's say an individual, 1 or 2 or 10, begin to see through that mask that we have or might have into an understanding of, this may be important to me now, but it may not be as important as I think it is. This is very difficult for us to do. I grant that. There's no doubt. And growing internally is not an easy matter. Because very able people get hooked into all kinds of things related to value. But in that softening and practice of attempting at least to reconsider, there is suddenly a few links that move in a direction to those who are more consciously aware of how our system works. And not that they're milder all the time, but they're not as reflexively responsive in certain issues, in various issues, but they hold wisdom and understanding to be more appropriate, and they learn how to hold back responses that they've already attempted to gentle down. Sounds interesting, but a group of those kinds of people then are helping, if you're interested in shift and change, they help you to attempt to do that. And then they definitely realize, without any doubt whatsoever, we don't want to change. Because the concept of self-protection or idea perception or protection is so validating for us. We are in love with however we see the world. And that is love. That's why we fight so hard to keep it in our humanity in a very young mode. This just may be worth thinking about, maybe not, depending on how you hear my words or these words. Um, you can see how much of a dilemma it is for anyone who holds dearly to a particular way of seeing anything to have them consider the possibility there might be different ways of seeing things. It's very difficult. So remember that when you're dealing with your friends, your partners, people that you know, if you can remember that, or think it's about any value whatsoever, that they are attempting to understand the world as you are. They just come up from a different angle. And they don't quite see it exactly the same as you do. That doesn't make them bad people. And it doesn't make you the only way to see things. We're constantly learning all the time, hopefully, and attempting to understand differently than what we can right now. This is not an easy thing to do. We would much rather maintain the way we think right now and devalue any other way of doing it. Now, that doesn't sound very nice, but this is what we do in life. If you're a normal individual, you can even remember stuff like that in your life. If you're not too defended, and many of us are defended because we have lived life, learned from it, and not learned from it. I think our best bet in understanding the effects of emotion and determination and tone is in relating to it as a human being and trying to understand it from that point of view. If you feel so inclined. Not everyone is inclined. It just means you're normal. So, Pat, think of our personalities and how we are affected by the news and by other people, and how everyone hurts, and those hurts cause responses to occur. In time, we forget the hurts, but we don't forget the responses. So, do the best you can, and I'll do the best I can. And if anyone out there would like to do the best they can, just to soften down the reflexes, it might be helpful in relationship to all those who are attempting, helpful in helping them to soften down too, perhaps. But as I say, the problem really is, I guess, that most of us on this planet, once we've made up our mind about something, don't find change very interesting. It's a dilemma. But if you recognize that you're practicing loving when you don't find it interesting, then you can maybe pause and say, is this the level of loving that I find comfortable in relating to overall in my life for the years I have left. How many, very many, we hope there might be. Thanks for the question, Pat. It's a difficult question to answer, but I did answer it in relationship to human beings. And remember, if you can, most creatures, trees especially, are living as well. So I'm sure those forest fires, they're not too happy about that one. And if you're interested in weather at all, and you happen to look things up, our dilemma, part of our big dilemma on this planet now, is the heating up of our oceans, which is causing tremendous levels of condensation, evaporation, and whipping up tremendous levels of wind, movement. And so the monsoons in the east always did affect our weather, but they're getting bigger. So do what you can in relationship to the environment as you can. Not easy to change even in that. I wish you well with that question, Pat. Here's another one from Carol Martin. I had to put my specs on. I've heard you say that people may come into this planet coarser than before. I don't know if that's typical or an occasional occurrence. Is this part of a so-called involution? Or is it evolution trying to lift humanity? Or is it just different to broaden a person's experience? It seems coarser means it's harder to be subtle and ease off the created self. I added created. She just said self. I wondered about that. So why coarser? There's all kinds of different reasons, Carol, and it's a very, very good question. One of these strange questions that need to be asked from time to time. One of the dilemmas that we have is in the old traditions, they talked about involution and evolution. In other words, you're coming in to develop a form that is valuable enough to start evolving into a higher state. It's one way to read that. Another way to read it would be there are many, many levels of life in our universe. And there are many universes that relate to levels of life. We come in through different levels to experience other levels. And if we have been able in other lifetimes or other levels, we may come in so that we can try to gain access to those higher levels while we're in the lower levels. Therefore, becoming involved with a concept, an idea that relates to evolving, evolution, whatever you want to call it. So there's all, because between the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st centuries, we've talked about evolution, or at least we commenced to talk about it during the Renaissance, about evolving individually as human beings, The dilemma with that is usually the discussion has occurred basically intellectually, emotionally, very difficult. Philosophers have tried to discuss this far back as the Greeks. Even farther, Sumerians were quite interested in this too, to some degree. At the same time, China and India were discussing some of these things as well. But ends up the concept of power over others um, kind of missed out. Recognition that because of our basic coarseness, this idea of will and power was primarily seen as a value because of this consistent engagement with wars and battles between nations for territory and money, economics, mining, lumber, uh, silver, way back, gold, all of this stuff oriented, material oriented stuff. Well, this is the way we have grown and developed. It's the nature of how we do things. So, how we have done things, I would rather say, we still have that within us. Now, it's also involved with how people see us, how we would like them to remember us. Well, these kinds of concepts, still focused on the matter material form. Well, in this involution evolution orientation, this material focus has always been kind of a tentative, subtle idea that people have alluded to. For example, if you're spiritual, then you have evolved and you are better than all those who haven't evolved. This is kind of a nonsense concept from my point of view, simply because you would hope that those who have evolved have moved past the need to be considered so valuable because they were here on these coarser planes. Then you start thinking a little bit beyond that kind of a statement. And you start to realize, no, just a minute. Who are they talking to? They're talking to people who think that way. And how are you going to help them to understand something? Well, you need to speak the language that they believe has to be true because they reserve the right to defend it at every instance of their engagement with life. Okay, then, we have to use that language. So along comes the area around the 14th century or 13th, 14th, 15th century, and they start using this idea of an individual moving it was in the occult background, mystical background as well, coming in to be able here and remembered here as a spiritual being, which included some levels of higher states or different states than what we have from many perspectives and what we could consider real as opposed to fantasy in some area. You see, we make up our mind about things and we decide that this is how things are, and then that has to be the way it is. And we've done that for centuries, well, for an awfully long time, past centuries, millennia. We still have those concepts that we're using because we're following those traditions. It's part of our language, part of our engagement. We talk together. You come up with a statement. You read a book somewhere. That statement makes some sense relative to the languages that have been used over the last few hundred years or so. And then, then we understand. Now we can talk to each other. We understand. We know stuff. It's a dilemma, but nonetheless, got to get back to Carol's question. This is involved with Carol's question. She also says, or is it evolution trying to lift humanity? I like this idea. She knows I like this idea. When a being comes in here and engages on these levels, they are tremendously affected by these levels. You and I, no matter who you may be, you already make up your mind about what that might mean. The language of the system, the human system, that's related directly now to our rendering of a life at a timeline, 2022. So we speak like this. We engage that way. We look at machines. We try to understand what's going on in the world. We try to even understand what's going on in us from time to time. As soon as we figure it all out from our perspective, we stop. We hold. This is the metal of our engagement with images that we need to have and maintain because we've learned stuff. And that means we're of value someplace along the line. Why bother continuing? Lifelong learning is the best thing you could ever do, as long as you move along and try to understand beyond what you already believe you think you know. This is not so simple, but it is evolving. You can do that in some places. Can't do it in every place. Oh, just a minute now. We're trained that if we do it in some places, special places, that we're considered more valued than others who can't do it like that. You don't do it to be more valued. You do it to understand the relationship that you have with life, that others have with life, that the relationship that other thought may trigger some piece of information within you, tying some things together that you may not have been able to come up with before. Learning about this understanding, learning about that understanding. Yes, it sounds it could get confusing. Yeah, sure. If your focus on something may be to protect you, confusion is a very good thing to come up with. You then protect the old way of looking at it. None of us can understand everything, but we can continue to learn. That will help the mind. Yep. It will help the emotion. It will give it other options, perhaps, other considerations. Allow ourselves to intervene within ourselves. See, we're trained that life is like an umbrella. You learn a bunch of stuff that others have learned and experienced, then you spit it back out, and now you know stuff. And now that umbrella underneath it is all you. And that's all you are. It isn't all you are. From my perspective, perforation into the umbrella allows you to understand a premise that Carl is hinting at. Is it possible for beings to come in here who have been able, and now they come in here and they're trying to affect the core of a human structure, billion people, sorry, where all these patterns internally, collectively, are engaged, but in different ways. Very, very strong feelings toward this, that, and the other thing. Others have strong feelings. See, strong feelings, that's the common bond, not the beliefs, the common bond. They come in to affect the common bond. What they do is they grow internally. They try to soften down their engagement with how life has to be them. They begin to understand broader than they ever could before. Little by little incremental things. It's not considered then by them to express how important and valuable they are because they figured that out. Because you can never figure it all out. And they begin to know that. And slowly, they are affecting from the inside the core of the collective called human being, humanity. It's a stretch. But it's an interesting notation. It's well within the idea of evolution and involution. The purpose is not to become important because you do something. The purpose is to do something the best you can. That may not be very much, but it may be significant because within you, there is a governor, a holding back, a need to be in a position. And all of a sudden, that position is not as important as it used to be. You have now affected all the people who are similar to you. Remember, Pat? Similar to you in intensity, in the search for viability, in the response reaction of misunderstanding, in the dilemma of being worthy when all are worthy. Sounds strange, but it is an interesting question. So that's a developmental clue for the human race. I remember many years ago, I couldn't figure out why some stuff was coming up in my thoughts and trying to understand. I had met some very interesting people who were tremendously able. Nobody knew them. And I couldn't believe their capacity within. I said, why would they bother coming here? And there was a very interesting visual that occurred in one of my meditations, because this question was really valuable to me. And it was a large being moving through the universe. Tremendous. Not a very big head kind of thing, but huge form. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Moving through the universe. That's very fascinating. And then I saw a single hand with a small mm, pointer on it. You got, it was me way back when, and you have to make this language important or make sense to me at the time. So here you go. And this little pointer touches the head of this form, which cannot perceive. Very well. So it starts heading in that direction of the pointer. Then this little pointer comes out again with this single hand and touches it on the other side, and it moves in that direction. And at the time, I had been thinking also about how much help we actually need as human beings, because we seem to not understand very much about where we're going and why we're going there, and how to get together on anything that makes some sense. Well, we get together in lots of small groups and make sense in small groups, and the small groups of 300 million or 1.5 million, or however big the groups are. We call them nations, but whatever. We determine, but we don't get together to try and be inclusive across the world. Oh, I can understand that. So then I had that meditation, and to me it seemed to say, whether it did or not, it seemed to say to me, we can be helped, but it's better we be helped and not know we're being helped. Because if someone is trying to help us, we don't want to be helped. We already figured it out. Whatever it was, can be, could be. So in answer to this question, yes, beings, in my opinion, this is an opinion, you need to think this stuff through for yourself. See if it makes any sense. And wonder about it. Beings can come into these planes, and they can be coarse, because the plane is coarse. And if they dive deep and then slowly move through the planes to attempt to gain access to higher states, one could say, one language of using it. Many people have different kinds of ways of explaining these things. Then, if they succeed to some degree in some way, you can be sure they have difficulty succeeding in other ways, I'm sure. Then that affects the core of humanity relative to all those beings who are similar to that structure internally. Now, that's only one way to help humanity. Others may come in and selectively engage with the ways that we engage with life, and they are really helpful in different ways. From every point of view. That's difficult for us. From every point of view related to being helpful. It's difficult for us because we choose different teams, and then we downplay other people's teams, and we don't like the idea of this group being kind of implying spirituality, and another group is not so spiritual, and all this sort of stuff that we come up with to validate kind of self-interest or a way of thinking. How long it will take our humanity to move beyond this, I have no idea. How long will it take any one of us to learn how not to react to something that isn't really too beneficial from our point of view to the whole of humanity? I don't know how we cannot do that because I'm born and brought up in humanity, as my thoughts are that many of us are. But it's an evolution, it's a developmental process. And how we do well in one area and not so well in another is likely how it will always work. If we can only remember that that is more likely to occur. And those who might be here in terms of higher states, they are not interested in being known. I know you've heard that before. They're more interested in doing than the recognition. So I think that's really wonderful. Maybe it's actually helpful to us ultimately. And don't ask me how long it'll take, but no matter how long it takes, hopefully it will occur. That would be kind of a different species, wouldn't it? I'm just looking here to see if I might have forgotten something. I think even, or is it just different to broaden a person's experience? It could be that, Carol, even that. It could be so many things. No one has a perfect answer to this. I just have an answer that makes some sense to me, through my experience. But, our relationship with the world itself is, as you know, always affected by the way we've grown up and how we believe things, how we believe personality should be as a whole, really. So it's moving out of that encasement little by little. Small increments are so important. Big explosions of moving out and then a whole lot of expression about it, not that important, because what happens is you reflex back into the old ways of doing things because they're more natural. As a matter of fact, you reflex back into doing similar things even after 10 years of engaging in a different way. You can see an old way of doing things sneaking back in. Be alert to that. That's all. That means you've understood something. You have an option. You can do the same thing again. I remember one time when that happened years ago. I said, well, yeah, but it's not that important in this situation. Probably more important than I thought. And it ended up that it was, so I needed to do something else. These things are quite interesting. They sneak in because we're trained that way. We're trained to be the way we were, the way we are. And that doesn't mean that's negative. It just means it'd be interesting to be able to see that stuff when it's happening. I wish you both well. These are two really not so easy questions, but pretty interesting and important questions from my point of view. It's about 9 minutes to. I think the next question would take a little longer. So I think what we'll do is close off for now. We're going to meditate, and I'll see you, whoever is out there, possibly on the weekend. It's a seminar for North America on the weekend, on Saturday, that is. So I wish you all well, and hopefully see you on Saturday. And now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding on our own. And take care of yourself.